Arlington, Virginia. And if there are any lessons from the tragedy of September 11th, it's that one person can make a difference.
And many people in New York and Washington, some with training, some without, made a difference that day. And Eyewitness News reporter David Jackson is live in New York with the stories of two such people. David.
Well, that is correct, David. This is one of those cases where we have a story of heroism that took place a year ago from somebody who really wasn't trained or prepared for that at the moment that it occurred. It's one thing to try to be a doctor. It's another to be a doctor without having gone through medical school.
Dirk Stanley knew that he could help. He just didn't know how. The third-year medical student was doing a rotation at Brooklyn Hospital Center when news of the attacks hit.
So Brooklyn is down that way, and we crossed over the bridge and came down to Fulton Street when we walked over towards the World Trade Center, and we couldn't see anything at that point because the smoke had become so thick and there were papers all over and ashes that were up to our knees.
Stanley continued walking, trying to make sense out of the chaos. He came up to a group of volunteers who were standing around. Nobody knew really what to do.
But I started barking out orders, and people started listening to me. We had the ambulances lined up over here. So the first thing I did is said, I need all the ambulance drivers to meet over here. I want all the ambulance drivers to keep your keys in the ignition, turn your motors off so we don't have any dead batteries, and wait at the ambulances for further instruction. I need all EMTs and paramedics to assemble over here. You guys are going to be our first line of triage. As patients start arriving, you're going to look at them. If there's anything bleeding, put a finger on it, bring them over here where they're going to be seen by doctors and nurses.
It was chaotic, frenetic, and frightening.
The World Trade Center has just fallen. We don't know how many casualties there are, but we have to prepare for treating lots of people.
Stanley doesn't know why, but something in him realized at that moment he had to do something fast.
I started delegating, and eventually, all of a sudden, I was in charge of the operations at the Triage Center, which is a very strange position to be put in as a third-year medical student.
Soon he was joined by many more surgeons, psychiatrists, ER nurses, all taking the direction of a third-year medical student. The triage unit was separated into different groups: critical, non-critical, and the walking wounded.
We couldn't see anything. There was so much smoke and so much ash. We were actually almost up to our knees in the ash, and there were papers flying around and shoes. I didn't know what to think of the shoes. There were lots of shoes lying out in the street, so people were just taking off their shoes so that they could run faster. So you're seeing all these pieces of evidence of complete chaos and turmoil and terror.
Check for bruises and internal shock.
They treated cardiac patients, people who had had trouble breathing, people who were exhausted, like firefighters.
There was so much smoke that they were constantly cycling back and forth. They would come up here for a little while, eat something quick, get their eyes washed out. We'd make sure that they were okay, and then they would go right down to ground zero again.
Hey!
Among the volunteers, Richard Gins, a social worker. He jumped in, joined Dirk, and began doing what he does best: crisis counseling.
We all pulled together and realized that we had to let people tell their story. That's the first thing they were going to need, is not give them direction, but give them opportunity to just talk about their pain.
Interesting year, huh?
Definitely.
Amid all the horror, Stanley and others learned a lot about reliance.
I have to say, that day, I think I saw absolute beautiful things.
Oh my God, this is so terrible.
Sometimes there were people crying about everything that was going on, and immediately there were 10 people rushing up to help that person, and being able to see that and experience that, that was really very comforting to me, to see what we're capable of as people to do in a time of stress.
And that is how one person can make a tremendous difference, even if he or she is not fully prepared for the moment. As Dirk said to us, you never really know exactly how you'll react until you're right there. For him, he found out. Live in New York, David Jackson, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
It's a great lesson, David. Thank you for that report. The victims of United Airlines Flight 93 are being hailed as heroes in Shanksville, Pennsylvania today.
The small town has forever been changed by